Hi everyone, and welcome to our In Conversation with today. So today we are going to be getting into a really cool topic of South Asian creative scene, what we think of the term, our experiences, and what we can do to push the boundaries. Before we actually start, I guess I'll explain a little bit about myself, and then Sheerah, if you could explain a little bit about yourself too. So my name's Harpreet. I run a CIC called Rebels Pilgrims. It's based in Southall, with the aim of getting global majority, working class, and female creatives into the industry. I co-host a podcast called Intersection. That's about intersectionality. If you're watching this, check out season 4. And I'm a communications brand consultant. So yeah, Sheerah, if you just want to explain a bit about yourself.
A little bit about me. I usually hate that question because
Yeah,
I
I
feel like I
know,
do
it's
a bunch of things.
the worst.
I'd say I'm definitely a multidisciplinary creative. I'm presenting, modeling, a bit of DJing, but essentially a lot of what I do is actually, and I'm lucky to say that I get to be myself, and people kind of have me on different projects with it to
Mm,
talk about, you know, certain topics like colorism to representation and visibility, especially focusing on like South Asian communities.
yeah.
Or on the other hand, it's like, me being myself, talking about my interests, like music and fashion. I've also got my own radio show on Foundations FM because I'm, really big on music and talking about music, and it's really shaped my identity. Um, but yeah, essentially, I guess I get to be myself and be a vibe.
I love that. I love that. It's like the whole package. You get the sheer experience
Yeah,
from
exactly.
working with you. It's awesome. I guess before we even get into the questions and stuff, for anybody listening, I had been following Sheerah on Instagram, and I'd seen some of her amazing videos where she was just talking a lot about her experiences within sort of South Asian creative scene. But we chatted online, we met in person, and I feel like we have such different perspectives, but similar perspectives on certain things that will be really good to talk about today as well. So, with that said, the first question is, what does South Asian mean to you? Does it feel like a limiting, expansive, or a bit of both?
What does I think we're just generally speaking, I guess South Asia is a region, but I do think that that phrase is a bit of an umbrella term that has been limiting and is
Mm,
used in a way to kind of make South Asian people come across as like a monolithic group when they're not. So for me
mm,
personally, as an individual, I feel like it's not really representative of me as a whole person, but also me as an individual. Like I'm just talking as a Tamil person. I don't really feel that term really represents me and my communities that well, because I think when generally, especially in the UK, when people talk about South Asians or South Asian
mm.
culture, they're not really referring to Tamil people. That's my personal experience with that. But I also talking to a lot of other people, they also feel similar ways about it. Because I think in the UK, in terms of the South Asians that are more visible, it tends to be more
Mm.
Punjabis and North Indians in general. So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I think when I think about South Asian in terms of identity, I don't necessarily relate to the umbrella term like you said. I definitely think we both have similar perspectives on this. I'm Harpreet first, definitely. And I said it on my podcast before where I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm me. I'm this person who was born in Kent, and my religion might be Sikh, but then there's so many other parts of my personality that come through first. I think you're right. Like it definitely is that collective term. I think there's positives in the sense it helps people to understand when it first came about as a term, not just Asian, there was South Asian. It was like, oh, this is really good. It's a bit more specific. But I think as time has gone on, it's actually less helpful because it's putting everybody in one grouping when there's so many different experiences as under the umbrella. You could be from Pakistan, it will be very different to your experience if you're Tamil. When I had a look at the regions, I was like, oh, what does actually come under South Asian? Is that Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri
Yeah.
Lanka. And then when you think about that, you're like, that is such a varied region. It's not like we're all the same. They're
Yeah.
very different cuisines, different music, different
Yeah.
religions, cultures. So yeah, it feels like actually it should be more expansive, but it's the way it's presented currently is not. And so, like, what would you say your experiences of sort of South Asian creative scene have been like?
In terms of, well, for me, I think I've had many experiences. I can't say that they have been always the best. I think I've had more negative than positive. I think going in, my main thing was I really want to have more intersectional, uh, nuanced conversations, but also have the uncomfortable conversations, like discussing issues like colorism or even the racism that
Hmm.
exists between different South Asian communities, palatability, caste and class, and I guess being someone that has always thought about these things in the South Asian creative scenes, it seems like it hasn't always been welcomed because it's almost like that thing of
Hmm.
like, oh, you should be grateful. But then it's crazy
Interesting.
because I feel like these scenes have created another hierarchy for brown people to try and get into. It's like already a lot of white dominated spaces reject a lot of people who don't fit into a certain model. And now we've got a brown space that also plays into white ideals as well. And for me, it's also a thing of it's not enough for me to just be in that space. I think that if we get into those spaces, it's our duty to always prop those doors open to see to welcome and bring in people that are still not being seen and perspectives that are still not being seen.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would say there's been a lot of privilege in these spaces. And I'm not talking
Hmm.
about normal privilege, like me and you have privileges, but I'm talking about,
Hmm.
you know, brown people that are ridiculously privileged,
Hmm.
that wouldn't even understand the plights of a working class white person, let alone a working class brown person,
Yeah,
but
so the
are
class
using
dynamic in that as well. Yeah.
yeah, and so using their brown identities to get a following or support from everyday normal brown people whilst
Yeah.
having no idea what it is like to be a normal brown creative who has to hustle and do all of these different things and
Yeah.
still not get half of what a lot of the more privileged, you know, groups of South Asians that are running these spaces get access to, right?
Hmm. It's interesting because I think when was thinking about my experience of the South Asian creative scene, I think they've been really like mixed based on the events that I've attended. And one of the reasons I actually started Rebels and Pilgrims was because I was attending some of these events in London and they didn't really represent me.
Mm,
And, you know, and I felt like maybe it's because, you know, I live in West London and there's a certain culture and community, and I've been here for a number of years now. And maybe these events were in East London, maybe there was that kind of divide. And then the other part I found was I found them really cliquey. So it was almost like if you weren't known, it was like you didn't belong.
mm,
Um, and that was something that when I thought about what I wanted to create, I want to create spaces which are inclusive of everyone in those experiences, which is why even like we're having this conversation. My question always goes to why did it feel like that and what can be done to make
mm,
those
mm,
better?
mm.
And then the other places I've been, sometimes they might feel really welcoming and whatever, but there's another part of me that's looking at the aesthetics of an event. So they feel very North Indian from the branding to the food. You know, we all love a samosa. Like I love samosa, but every
Yeah.
event, that's what we're catering. It's like, can we just get a bit of diversity even in that space? And to the topics that the artists are talking about and even the sort of artists being platformed. I want to go to these events and learn something new. We've just talked about all the different countries that come under the umbrella of South Asian, and I'll attend these specific like South Asian events, but they're not. They're more like Indian events, Punjabi events,
Mm, mm,
North
mm.
India, you know, like whatever. Um, and so, yeah, that's why sometimes when I thought about it, I was like, that's why I get frustrated because, like, well, actually, there's so much more we could be talking about.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just not what I've experienced.
That again, it's like I would say, like, what is the point of us having any of these spaces if it's not about progressing and getting new
Mm,
perspectives and learning new things? But I think
mm,
it's that general thing of like any space that we go into that, like saying, like, check your private privilege at the door. I think it's our duty to
mm,
always be aware of our own privileges when we enter these spaces, um, and look at who is still not being represented, um,
mm.
And I think it's also a thing of like, look at who's also running these spaces. I think that
Hmm.
if these spaces really truly gave a shit about shit like, class representation and caste representation and all, I think that would mean that people would start actually questioning the types of brown people that are in charge, making the
Hmm.
decisions, curating these
Hmm.
spaces and
Yeah.
events.
Yeah.
And that would also mean then a system starts getting toppled. And I guess the most privileged in these communities don't want us to question the status quo,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when we think about who actually gets chosen to represent in those creative spaces and those accents, connections, looks,
Mm,
and how
mm,
all of that filters into that hierarchy, at, even within our spaces. And I think that's what often that we're trying to dismantle. Like it kind of
yeah.
goes back to what I said earlier around South Asian often means Indian or North Indian,
Mm,
and how all those things then feed into what the umbrella terms or the events look like.
mm,
Um, like I feel like the version of South Asian we get is the version that the colonialists, is that a
yeah.
word?
Yeah.
And the colonizers,
Yeah.
they would have been. That's the version they see of us.
Yeah.
That's not the version
It's like they're
that it
packaging
is.
brownness for a
Yeah.
white audience, essentially.
Yes.
That's how I
Yeah.
felt I guess, especially in like, because obviously I've been in more like fashiony spaces, I guess. So like
Hmm.
fashion orientated, like fashion, South Asian spaces tend to be more on like this like colonial side of brown identities and like kind
Interesting.
of like this beige washing of brown, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
everything becomes heavily curated, and just washed down in a way that a white audience will be able to understand and even exotified in many ways.
Hmm.
And that also then leaves so many South Asians not actually fully being represented or seen. I also think
Agreed.
that because and these spaces are also very conservative
Hmm.
and respectability politics plays into these spaces a lot. So,
Hmm. When you say
actually,
respectability politics, what do you sort of mean by that?
I think when I say what is deemed as respectable, I feel for myself that I've had to deal with a lot of that kind of politics within South Asian
Mm.
spaces,
Oh, interesting.
whether they're creative or not, because
Mm.
I realized that I could be saying something so on point, but it's not validated because of the way that I choose to express myself or even the way that I
Interesting.
look
So it's the whole like being a submissive woman
or
thing
being
coming back
demure.
again.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
And then
yes.
I guess even that
I
thing of like,
feel that. I feel
yeah.
that.
And it's like, I'm
Anyone
not
with a
that.
voice, it's like shut up, and you're like, no, 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 no.
Yeah. And like, if you're seen as in a certain way, and I think also then if you incorporate colorism into it as being dark skin and it's nothing, I wouldn't say I'm an aggressive person, but because I'm a woman who is dark skinned with an opinion, automatically it's like, oh, you're trying to attack us. I'm like, but if
Hmm.
let's say a guy, especially like or a
Oh,
light skinned person tried
definitely.
to express that, they'd be like, wow, that's so smart, that's so intelligent. I'm also
Mm,
not going to accept crumbs. I'm not going to be in these spaces. Like, thank you for having me. It's like you're welcome that you have someone like me because
yeah.
I'm not here to pander into the people that are running these spaces or, you know, the people in these spaces. When we first started getting into
Mm,
the teens, it's like, oh, now I've got access into this space and you really
yeah.
want to make a change. So then you're trying to dim yourself down a little bit and like tone it down because you think, I need to navigate. And I realize, you know,
Do you
it
think
doesn't
that's
matter.
also a thing of being a woman in the space? Because I feel that definitely. Even when we were talking about the creative community, and I've said this so much all the time, I'm like, it's really male dominated as
Mm-mm-mm.
well. And then what you're saying there, being then that opinionated woman who's
Mm.
like, yeah, I'm the top of my game, like as well.
Yeah.
That is not necessarily received always
Mm.
with open arms.
Yeah.
And like you said, like when you don't spotlight those different opinions and views, we're only stopping ourselves from experiencing difference and experiencing a wide range of views and people and
Yeah.
cultures and everything all in one.
Yeah.
I think there was something I read or listened to, I don't know, that was about how there needs to be more places where you can have discussions with people that are different to yourself,
Yeah.
because actually that builds better
Yeah.
communities and that builds better ways of thinking, and it allows you to realize actually you can have your opinion, but then you have to listen back to somebody else's,
Mm, mm.
and it's a conversation rather than just living in your world of maybe social and people that just speak like yourself. So yeah, I think there's a much even bigger benefit, not just within South Asian communities, but to lots of aspects of it, by having diverse voices in not just the people who attend, but also in the people who run the events, because that's also can impact. But like with that, and I think we've talked a little bit about it now anyway. But is there any other ways that you, from your perspective, that you think we can make the spaces more sort of inclusive and equitable, um, and representative?
I mean, genuinely, I think it all comes with like people having to check themselves. It's like I said before, I think we all have
Mm,
to, we're all having to continue to always do the work, and doing the work is checking our privilege at the door. I think that
yeah,
we need to always think outside of just our own experiences and
yeah,
existence, right?
agreed.
And it's something that I try and practice a lot of the times when I'm in any space. It's like I'm in this space,
Mm,
and I've had to go through my hurdles. Imagine
mhm,
someone else who might also not have access to
mhm,
things that I may have. Um, I think also like something that I've been really thinking about is maybe these South Asian spaces like need to start doing some kind of census, seeing, because it seems like this is a problem in with every platform, with every space.
mm,
So I think if a census was made available, show like, asking people about, their ethnic backgrounds, class backgrounds,
mm,
education, um, and even actually like where they're from, and if we're just talking about the scene in the UK,
yeah,
because that's a whole other
yeah,
thing, because
yeah,
you know you know what I mean?
regionality, yeah,
Like
yeah,
being from the West Midlands, why I've had to move from like the West Midlands to London is because the opportunities were here. And that's just a general thing. That's
mm,
not even a South Asian thing
yeah,
now. Like,
it's a whole culture, like,
yeah.
creative industry problem, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely,
So
definitely.
even representing South Asians from different parts of the UK is really important if we're
Mm,
just focusing on the South Asian creative scene. Um,
yeah,
and, all of these things matter. And I think when people use that excuse, like, well, not everyone can be represented in one space. That's true. I understand. Because the
mm,
thing is, like I said, the work is never done. This
mm,
isn't a matter of, oh, once you do this census or once you get this information, that means you're never gonna do. No, you have to keep on doing things so
mm,
things can get better. But there's never like
mm,
an end goal. We have to always do the work. And then I think it's also lazy to say that, because when people say, well, not everyone can be represented, then why is it that it's
mm.
always the same communities being represented?
Hmm. Do
'Cause
you think, like, sometimes, 'cause as you were saying that, I was thinking, is it that because we were saying that South Asian is a broad term, actually, maybe we need to start being more specific about the
yeah,
communities we are representing
yeah.
in our communities,
Yeah,
because
I think it should be
actually saying
celebrated that we're
South
different.
Asian,
Yeah.
maybe just say, oh, it's for Indians, or it's just for
Yes,
this,
okay, yeah.
and delve into the specifics, because
Yeah,
actually then people go, oh, that's what that one's about. Because, like you said, like, there is, I do sort of agree that not everyone can be everything, but I think there is a way to be specific so that it
yeah.
allows
But also
other
allowing
people to
spaces.
come through, other organizations who are focusing
Yeah.
on other areas. Maybe there's collaborations there, maybe there's other
Mm.
stuff that can be done. And that's where, the umbrella term of South Asian does become problematic, because for the organizers, that's that sense of like, well, it can't be for everyone. Secondly, then for the people attending, they're like, why isn't it representing me? But they didn't know that that space
Yeah,
wasn't meant to be. And if you are then going to use, to your point, South Asian as a umbrella term, then make sure you
yeah,
are
do the work.
representing everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. I don't think it's possible to, like, do everything. You can't do everything under one sitting.
Mm,
That's not what I'm saying, because it's impossible to
yeah,
do that.
yeah.
But making the steps to also start making it being, like, more culturally diverse, ethnically
Hmm,
diverse, um, also diverse in class and educate, like, people of all backgrounds, like, that
hmm,
is important. It's a work in progress, but I'm just like, this is me thinking about who's still not in this space whilst I'm in those spaces being like, this
Yeah.
isn't enough. Like, this isn't
Yeah.
good enough. And I
Mm.
think people don't want to admit, but people are quite self-centered. They're like, well, I'm in this
Mm.
space now. I'm represented now. Like, I'm here. So
Mm.
it's like, I
It's
could give a fuck about
interesting.
anybody else.
It's really interesting you say that because I was thinking about, and I was going to mention in the next question, but like this thought of abundance as opposed to scarcity. And I think sometimes when there's that sense of you're maybe an organizer or people, even individual creatives in the scene, I think there's sometimes this sense of there's not going to be enough for everybody, but actually that comes from a mindset of scarcity as opposed to a mindset of abundance. But I think when you have, you know, a lot of these events, there might be certain
Mhm.
brands that they're working with, and then people start thinking, oh, there's only one can be in that space or in
Yeah.
that room, and therefore that needs to go to these people. Whereas actually, if everybody thought with a sense of, oh, there's enough for everyone, I think it would change people's mindsets to be like, well, actually, I want to give
Mm.
that opportunity to someone different rather than the same people,
Yeah.
because maybe they're close and they're friends and they have those connections. So like looking outside of that. I think the other bit of diversity I was thinking about going beyond and platforming people beyond the Indian or even South Asian aesthetic.
Mm.
In my mind, I feel like sometimes we can get a bit stuck in the past.
Yes.
And I want to
Also,
see more diversity. Yeah.
yeah, I think that for me especially when I, we said that when you were like your Harpreet before everything else,
Yeah,
I always
yeah,
say
yeah.
I might be Tamil before I'm South Asian, but I'm Sheerah before anything else. And
Yeah, yeah,
whilst
yeah.
for example, my Tamil identity is an aspect of me, but isn't my whole
Mm,
thing, right?
100%,
And to
100%.
and I always say that if someone was to come up to me and they were just to point out that one thing, I'm like, you're missing the bigger
Mm,
picture because how many of the Tamil people, how many of the South Asian people exist in this world? What makes
mm,
me different or my own person? And what makes me unique isn't just because I'm Tamil. What makes me unique is because I'm
totally.
Sheerah, right? And all of
Yeah.
the things that I'm into and, how I choose to express myself. And
Yes, yes.
whilst these identities might shape our experiences, they shouldn't be the thing that boxes us in. And I
Exactly,
think, yeah, and I
exactly.
think unfortunately in a lot of South Asian spaces, they've so hyper focused on this one thing that they haven't allowed them to explore themselves as people, like as a whole
Yeah.
being. And then
Mm.
then the conversations become boring. Okay, like I'm gonna be honest with you, like I really can't resonate with a lot of like Mindy Kaling characters,
Oh, yes,
right?
yeah, you're saying,
Don't
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I don't like her characters. I think that she creates characters that might okay, I would say that maybe people that are maybe brown girls that are more awkward and
Mm,
more traditional maybe resonate with that. I'm not saying that people don't resonate
mm,
with that, but those characters still are caricatures and like very stereotypical brown girl characters, right?
mm.
And they don't resonate to like a whole plethora of people that exist, and I think that that's why it's also important to push brown artists who are not just focused on being brown.
Definitely,
They're artists for
definitely.
yeah, because I'm a creative first and foremost. That happens to be all these other things,
Yeah.
but like I'm not creating work just purely on the fact that I'm Tamil. I think it's important to use my platform to speak on certain issues, but will I make that my whole thing? Absolutely not, because
Mhm.
that's not that's not the whole part of that's not what I'm about anyway. But I think as
Yeah.
creators, I think people don't want to hear that because I think some people hear that and they're like, I understand. We've all been in that place where when we were younger, we felt ashamed of our identities.
Yeah, yeah.
We were all trying to whitewash
Well,
ourselves
we
and
were
stuff.
told that we should feel ashamed of our identity. Being
Yeah.
Indian was not cool when I was growing up.
Yeah.
No
So it's like
way.
being brown, being all these things. We were told
Yeah.
not, but I think I've gone through a journey of like, you first hyper focus on something in order to be like, I need to be proud of this. But now I'm at a point where I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm really proud of that aspect of me, but like, I also need to be able to explore myself as a whole person and
What
understand
you're
I'm so many different things.
What you're talking about is basically like, so Riz Ahmed, I remember reading an article of his a long time ago now, and he was talking about why he went to America and also like the roles he gets casted. And he said there were like three levels. So he mentioned the first level being the stereotypical, he would be like the suicide bomber or the
Yeah.
one in the shop or something like
Yeah.
that. And he goes, and the second level is like you're the cab driver or something in the middle. Then the third one, I just remember he was like, that's where you're just you. But he's totally right. The cast where his color of his skin doesn't matter to the script. It just
Yes.
is, he is playing whatever character that is. And I
Yeah.
thought that's so interesting that he mentioned that, because that's exactly kind of what we're talking about when
Yeah.
it comes to how can we evolve these spaces. It's not, like from my perspective, you know,
And it's not even
we're
about
British
spaces
too.
as well. It's also about the art
Yeah.
that's being created, right? And
Yes, yes.
actually put like kind of going off that, I don't know whether you've
Hmm.
seen during lockdown, do you know the TV show Beef?
Yes.
So
Yes. I
this
freaking
show,
loved that. It gave me anxiety because there was a lot going on,
the
but I
reason why I
really
liked
liked
the
it.
show, and I
Yes,
said this
yes.
to someone, I said this to my friends and I was like having this conversation. I was like, Beef is what I wish South Asian characters could be like. You know why? Because in Beef,
Mm.
them being, I think they were like Korean, right? Korean Americans.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
wasn't central to the story. They
No.
were flawed beings. They had moments where you didn't like them. Like they weren't characters. They were just real people.
Yeah.
They
It was
weren't
really good,
created to
that
be,
was,
yeah,
yeah.
they weren't created to be representative. They were created to be
Mm.
real, right? And then on
Mm.
top of that, I think that why when they did, because obviously there's like the whole like Christian Korean thing, when they put cultural things in, it was done in a way where it adds to the story and the character, but not in a way where it's overly focused on that. It was like this is part
Hmm.
of their identity, but it's not. Again, it's like I think that when I've seen even brown characters being made and they have certain things to highlight. It's like
Hmm.
they randomly put these random things in to be like, oh look, they're brown. Does that make sense? So it's not
Mhm.
like when we saw Beef, like when I saw Beef, I was like, this is a fleshed out character. Like these are
But that
nuanced,
feels authentic, because then that
authentic. Yeah.
character, to what he was saying, has depth. It's not just a face with like things around them that go, "Look at me, I'm so brown." It's
Wow.
like you're
Yes.
actually connecting with this character
Yes.
and you're feeling their emotions the
Yeah.
same way you would do if it was anybody of any other
Yeah.
sort of ethnicity.
And you can see from the music choice, like that was another thing.
Yes,
The
yes,
soundtrack music
yes.
choices. Whereas with
Yeah,
South
yeah.
Asian characters, it's like they have to randomly put some random Bollywood shit in and whatever. Like respectfully, like I don't want to see that anymore. It's boring.
Mhm.
And if you are going to
Mhm.
incorporate something, do it tastefully. Do it so that it makes sense, not so that someone watching being like, "Oh yeah, that's about." We know it's a brown character. We can see that's a brown character.
And I think that's where, when I look at these events and I look at the way that we move as a sort of South Asian collective scene, people in that space, the part that I always think about is that we're British too, and I
Yeah,
feel like I don't see enough of that come
yeah,
out in those spaces. There's influences from jazz to blues to rock to
yeah,
hip hop,
exactly.
or like fashion, from like punk to like
Yeah,
grunge to celebrity culture. Like there's all those things that when I think about myself growing up, or like even when you're talking about the TV shows, or even it all feeds in, doesn't it? Because if you
yeah,
have those spaces, and we're talking about community spaces initially, but if you have those spaces where all those things are represented, that creates connections, that hopefully creates opportunities then for those things to go above a community event and into the sphere of industry programs, films, adverts, all those things. It's like our way of educating the masses of this
mm,
is what it means to be like me in this country,
yeah,
living my life as Harpreet or Sheerah. So
yeah.
I think it's quite interesting. And I think we've talked a bit about this, but like I guess our sort of final question was around like, what do you think are like the practical steps artists, organizations or platforms with privilege can, do to maybe open up that space for others in the room? And I know you talked about some of the bits already around, you know, being aware, and I've got a couple of thoughts on that too, but I'd love to know if there was anything else that you wanted to add to that.
Um, I think the practical steps again, it's like I said, like the census, I think would be a great idea for a lot of
That would
spaces
be
and
really
platforms to
cool.
take on because actually we don't have even enough information. Like we have these conversations and we know that these spaces, there's disparities that exist in it, but we haven't actually got any
Mm,
data to kind of help us like make
yeah,
our back it up, right?
yeah,
If we have this data available, then we can start being like, "Oh, like, okay, it's easier then actually because you're actually getting data and being like, okay, how let's from using this data,
yeah,
we can see that we can do this or this community can be represented." Um,
yeah,
but yeah, and also like always making sure that also like new, fresh talent is always being put up as well and not just like you're
yeah.
just using friends. And obviously we're all struggling creative, but we all
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
yeah, we can't be gatekeepers because it's like we
Yeah.
always need to be able to use whatever, connections we have to also help each other, right?
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. No, I 100%. And I think one of the points I was going to make was around like building solidarity.
Yeah.
So I think the other way that people can do that um, is so one of the things, and this is just something I've observed, is like in the events that I've done or events I've been to, I've seen people from maybe larger organizations attend those events. And you can see there's like sourcing for ideas, sourcing
Yeah.
people, talking to everyone other than the event organizer. And I'm not saying that you can't go to events, because that's the whole purpose of going to events sometimes is to get a bit of inspiration, and
Mm,
that's
mm,
fantastic. I think what I would like to see also happen is those same people also go speak to the event organizers,
mm,
go
mm,
make that
mm.
collaboration, go
Yeah.
connect with them, go say, look, love what you're doing. Tell them that you love what they're
Yeah.
doing. And then say, look, I'm thinking of doing something similar. Maybe let's connect, let's do something in the future, let's build that solidarity. It's going back to that mindset of abundance rather than scarcity. If you're going to go
Mm,
do something, that's fine. Do the same thing. I
mm,
don't care, but don't do it in secret, and don't just come and think that you can't build that connection and make our community stronger together, because we
mm,
are
mm,
stronger
mm,
together,
mm, mm,
rather
mm.
than that whole divide and conquer
Yeah.
mentality. We don't need to be like that. We
Yeah.
just need to be, open to one another.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to build the
Yeah.
community further.
I was
And
also
then,
going
you
to
go on.
add when you were saying, about also, building solidarity, I think another thing that I think a lot of South Asian spaces really should be doing is also working with other marginalized communities
There.
outside of just like, because something that I've also seen again in these creative scenes where like for
Hmm.
me, and I'll always say this, so many Black spaces have been so welcoming to non-Black
Hmm.
POC people, and
Hmm.
actually a lot of our own ability to be able to do what we, can do, to even, like, inspirations and stuff like that, that has come
Yeah.
from Black culture and the Black community, and I think that more of these South Asian spaces need to make that effort, to, make the spaces welcoming to, um, you know, Black creatives and the Black community in general,
Yeah.
because I've seen so many non-Black people of color be able to benefit in those spaces and,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
learn from those spaces. And also, we shouldn't be in this bubble. Our spaces
Yeah.
shouldn't just be about, like, people, South Asians will complain, like, no one seems to be talking about it, blah, blah, blah. That's because you're literally screaming into a void of, oh, I mean, into a bubble of other South Asian people just like you. And then you're not giving access to anybody else outside the community to learn about you. And you're
Yeah.
not even being welcoming as well. So I think
Yeah.
that's really important that the spaces are open so that we can learn from others and they can learn from us. And and that's how we also just make things better for everyone, not just South Asian people, but like,
Yeah, you do. You do.
um
Like back in the day, as politically, we were all black. So I think there's definitely something in that. I feel like there's a few stages going back to like Riz Ahmed's kind of stages. I feel like we're at step one with the sort of the stereotypy, and we're moving into step two. But I think what you're describing is like step three, where actually that's where we are all able to help one another,
mm, mm,
and
mm,
those spaces, because they do naturally, by the nature of them being planned as very diverse, very open spaces
mm,
where you're not just South Asian, you're yourself, it then does create
mm,
a really safe and welcoming
yeah,
space for everybody to come in and learn something from. I think for
yeah,
those organizers as well, like I would also say, like, challenge yourselves. We all have privilege, like we
mm,
all have things that maybe we were brought up with, thought of. I don't think anybody's creating spaces to go, oh, I want to exclude people. They're just doing what they think
yeah,
is right. But at the end of the day, I think, ask yourself, like at the last few events, who did I spotlight?
mm,
What are my blind spots? Am
yeah,
I being London centric? Am I focused on a particular class? Have I only talked about topics that only relate to a certain whatever? And what does that mean for my organization and what it is that I'm here to support and bring people in with? It's kind of like looking at yourself, so first, so you can help other people, because
mm,
a lot of the time, like I said, we all have our privileges, we all have our blind spots. And if you just take that 5 minutes to think of that,
mm,
I think it could help, to your point as well, like the wider society.
mm, mm, mm,
And it can help elevate. South Asian communities and events and this space and this creative
Yeah.
scene in an even better way. When you look at them brands and how they view us, we can teach those brands
Yeah.
how to look at us,
Yeah,
how
because
to
they
work
don't
with
know.
us, because they don't know. And
No.
there is so much appropriation out there at the
Yeah.
moment. It is insane. So I think there's so many benefits for us all if we do that work, and
Yeah.
the organizations out there do that. I think it's been really interesting talking about this actually, just as a creative scene in general, like from like who we are to how we identify and how this space is. I think the work you're doing is awesome. Like, keep doing it, keep saying what you need to say out there. I don't think there's anybody um, there might be certain group of people, and often it's the ones who want to moan who are the loudest,
Yeah.
especially on social media. So you're probably getting all those ones like coming into your comments and whatever. But I definitely know people like myself and even other people in my community, like community of friends and people I interact with, really appreciate the stuff that you're doing. And I think, between us, we can definitely make some waves.
Yeah, definitely. And I also appreciate, like, I think even like the solidarity between us, I think it's really important where, like,
Hmm.
we're two people from like also different South Asian backgrounds. And
Mm-hmm.
I think so often as well, especially when I'm talking about like racism that exists between different South Asian communities and stuff like that,
Yeah.
especially when I brought up, like the whole Punjabi thing,
Mm.
people straight away jump to the whole thing of like, oh, so you hate Punjabis. I'm like, literally, that's not what I said. Literally, that's not what I said. And actually showing this is like proving a point where like we can actually
Yeah.
talk like adults and have like actually this conversation isn't uncomfortable for us because we know what
No.
the deal is. It's only uncomfortable when you're being the problem, right?
Hmm.
And so it's like we've been able to have also so many conversations without having like that. I call it even brown fragility
Mm,
because I
yeah,
think
yeah,
there's a lot of
yeah,
there's a lot of brown fragility and pride in the
yeah.
community that, we don't talk about the issues publicly. We can't say this in front
Mm,
of the white man, like, that kind of thing.
yeah,
And I'm like, no,
yeah,
these conversations need to be open because
they
I think the
do.
problem, because at the end of the day, the only when we choose not to have these conversations publicly, the only people benefit from it are the people that are causing the problem, right?
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
we're still left in the same positions, in the same places. And yeah, I just think that people should just have these conversations um more. That's really
yeah. We only harm ourselves. With no more
exactly.
conquering divide. Let's just work together
Yeah.
because we all want to do good things. We all want to be out there, but let's make it happen.
Mm-mm-mm.
But no, it's just been really cool. So thank you for taking the time to like do this conversation. Like I said, it's not like we've been buddies forever. We've literally
Yeah.
had a couple of conversations and hit it off, and it just felt like the right thing
Yeah.
to put this together. So thank you.
Yeah, I've had a really great time having this conversation. I really hope that anyone that watches or people seeing clips or something, I hope it does um create some kind of important discourse that is needed.
Mm,
And I hope
definitely.
people don't see that this is not an attack on platforms or these scenes. It's simply
Mm,
asking them to do better, you
yeah.
know,
And asking us all to do better,
do
even if you're
better.
not like big
Exactly.
in the scene, like if you
Yeah.
have anybody who has a community or anybody who is an artist or anybody, we all have moments where we can give opportunities to
Yeah.
different people. We all have that power at a certain point, and it's taking that moment to go, oh, ooh, actually, let me think about that.
Yeah.
Am I being inclusive for my
Yeah.
community? And that's kind of what it comes down to. I think people really take some good stuff from this, and I hope it does create some conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Until next time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.